All right, well, good afternoon. We are launching a brand new program for us this afternoon, and this is our Certificate of Origin program with the American World Trade Chamber of Commerce. And so today we have Alex and it's Sonifred, right?
That's close enough. That works very well.
Himself. But so Alex is on today to really kind of just launch us into the program. We actually have a few chambers that are on that already offer the program. So I think for them, it'll be a really great refresher. Solon is on that does
Oh
the
yeah.
yeah, so Marilyn is on if you need anyone to answer any questions or anything. So she is
Mhm.
able to help as well and answer any questions. And I know she actually has a couple of questions. So
Oh, great, great.
yeah, so this will be a really great introduction to the program. And I know we have a lot of chambers that are interested in this program. So Alex, it's all, the floor is yours. So I'm just going to turn it over to you.
Great. So, as mentioned, my name is Alex Sonderfrank. I'm with the American World Trade Chamber of Commerce. We have offices in a couple of different places around the U.S. Our main one is in the New York City Metro. We like to say it is on the New Jersey side. I'm coming from the DC Metro, so this might be somewhat unique because I imagine a lot of the programs that you currently work with Cindy on are probably more local affiliations and local groups. So this is one where we are a national chamber, but we work very closely with a lot of chambers, and we love getting to work with associations like Cindy's because it makes it easy for us to kind of connect with a lot of chambers all at once. Um, I have been through the entirety of the Ohio region. Actually, this year was my first time. I came for the eclipse, so I went up to see it at that time, and we were driving, me and my wife and first girlfriend, right? We were driving up through and got to see the whole of the state pretty much, and so that was really, really pleasant. So we all enjoyed that. My wife brought her dad along too, so he also enjoyed it. And we had our daughter, so it was a pretty full car. Um, but just off of that, right, just to kind of introduce us as an organization. So, as noted, we're a federal chamber, so we're on a national level. We do partner with a lot of other chambers. So, right now we're at around 140. That is almost only chambers, or a few member associations or other similar 501c6 organizations that are membership based, but effectively kind of fill the same spot as a chamber. We're also formally recognized by the International Chamber of Commerce, so they have an accreditation program around a certificate of origin program, and we make sure all of our staff that are going to be issuing certificates have gone through that training, and they've also done a deep dive on error process, which is why we have that accreditation. It means that each of the certificates of origin that we're issuing can actually be verified via the ICC, and we know that does happen quite a lot. And that's also one of the reasons why we have an easy time with the electronic issuances, because we have that third-party verification via the International Chamber of Commerce. Um, I'm going to really start pretty far back, right? So on just what is a certificate of origin, because I think that does get missed pretty often. The most simple understanding is that it is one of a few key documents for clearing customs and actually getting goods into another country. So if you're bringing goods into another country, there's a couple of things you're going to need. It's going to be, you'll have an invoice, you'll have often a packing list that'll detail all of the different items and packages that are coming in. And you're also going to have a certificate of origin, which is going to specify what the product is that you're bringing into the country, and it's going to specify where the product originated. That doesn't necessarily mean it's coming out of Ohio, right? It could be something that's being re-exported that, maybe was made in Canada, maybe made somewhere else, right? It's wherever the country is that that product was last materially impacted. Um, One thing I want to be clear on from the beginning around this partnership, because we'll get into some of the weeds later, we do not expect any of you guys to really get an understanding of the rules around certificates of origin, the rules of origin, or be able to answer questions that might come up. That one of the benefits of kind of jumping in and partnering with us is it really takes that responsibility and puts it on our side, where you get the victory of being able to kind of promote it out and get your members the help that you need. and leave it to us to kind of answer those questions. So when there's a complicated situation around trying to make a determination of the origin, which is the most important thing on a certificate of origin, we really are going to be probably the most qualified group in the United States to really tackle and help audit and answer those questions. It's also a document that commonly goes through a Chamber of Commerce to be stamped and issued by the local chamber. I have a longer explanation here on the right. You don't have to dig into that exactly, but that would be a more technical explanation in case you ever want to come back to that. As mentioned, this video is being recorded, but I'll also have the slide deck sent out to Cindy, and so she can distribute it after the call today. But I want to kind of take a second just to kind of really highlight that Chambers of Commerce are uniquely responsible for stamping and issuing certificates of origin. So there are not other organizations that are going to be recognized as having that authority to stamp, sign, and issue back certificates of origin, meaning that companies in your area are going to need the service and they're going to really look to you potentially to get it done. Now, they may not always need the chamber stamp. That is a question that we commonly get, but it's also difficult for us to guarantee when they will and when they won't need a chamber stamp as well, because there are always new rules, new regulations coming up. But that is something we can kind of get into as well if your potential users have questions around that. I do oftentimes highlight what I see as kind of common trends for chambers issuing locally. So if you are doing it yourself, there might be some questions around what the process looks like. So what you should be doing, what you should be doing to vet the certificate of origin or vet the company, as well as what liability it might bring on to the chamber. So ideally, if you're going to issue certificates of origin yourself, you would have both professional services liability insurance as well as errors and omissions liability insurance. These aren't generally packaged as part of general liability, so it might be something you want to consider if you're looking at getting these issued yourself. And then as well, I very rarely see chambers that are stamping themselves having some kind of process to keep backups. We today got a request for records from 2021. So it is a case that they will, and that was coming from customs in Turkey. So they specifically had a question come up around some documents that we issued back in 2021. Again, that responsibility comes over to us instead. So we handle that piece of the puzzle. You're not expected to, again, know the process, keep backups or anything like that. And I oftentimes like to use a phrase that it's a really well-kept secret for a lot of chambers that do issue certificates of origin, because for some of them it may not be revenue generating, so you're not going to promote it, you're not going to let companies know you can do it because it's just a waste of effort on your side, and you don't necessarily want, especially non-members coming in and trying to get a lot of certificates of origin stamped when you don't really know who they are. So again, it kind of leaves that process over to us. And so I always kind of highlight the conflict here is that there may be a requirement by your audience to be able to provide certificates of origin, but they may not be able to even find out that you guys do this in the first place. So it's important to be able to say, well, here's a way we can connect them with the American World Trade Chamber to issue the certificates of origin, and we're going to promote it all we want, because no matter what we do, it's not going to increase the amount of labor on our side to get the documents processed. It's not going to increase the amount of time to get the documents processed as well. And so that's really kind of where we come in to provide a value there. One thing that we might look at if we have time, and we'll see how many questions, is other chambers that have promoted the service as well. So really the responsibility on your side, I'll mention, are going to be two things. One is going to be to have some kind of a landing page set up, not too hard, and we have some basic suggested wording that you can kind of copy paste onto that. And then the other space is going to be essentially to let people know that it exists, right? That could be as simple as just keeping the landing page, letting people find it organically, or when phone calls come in, having a place to point them. Or it could be something where you want to make sure you educate your audience that it is a service that exists and just see who wants to potentially opt in. I think the value to exporters, I like to highlight this, is pretty easy to understand. First and foremost, they will actually have a way to get a certificate of origin if, say, you're in an area where, again, it's a well-kept secret and they don't know, they can potentially turn to you. But of course, it means as well they don't have to drive down and potentially spend their time getting a physical document processed. Even if you're potentially doing it free to members, um, to actually query that document afterwards is going to cost them quite a bit of money, right? So there's a cost for them to kind of drive down to the chamber, but then to put that in a courier envelope and potentially send that overseas is going to be pretty expensive compared to working with a fully electronic end-to-end process. So there's that time saving, that cost saving. It's also, there's a security component. Again, I mentioned before, we are responsible for keeping backups on our side. That benefits you as a chamber, but it also is going to benefit the exporter too. It means they're not going to be responsible for making sure that they keep a certificate of origin on record. So that benefit kind of goes both ways in that scenario. The other thing that I always like to highlight is we do a lot of these. So we are going to be very familiar with what kinds of requirements or restrictions we're seeing in different countries. So last week, one of the chambers under the umbrella for you guys actually reached out around a shipment into Qatar where they were seeing new regulation that they didn't expect before. We've been hearing about it, but only for about 2 weeks, right? So we're a little bit ahead of the game, and we generally know what different customs officers are going to be pushing or requesting. So it lets us kind of pass that information on to whoever is getting the certificate of origin as well. So if we know, for instance, Turkey right now wants to see their name spelled in a more historically accurate way. They don't want the conventional spelling. I don't know if anyone saw news around that, but it is something where we're stopping people if they're submitting to us and we see they put an address for Turkey and they've used the conventional westernized spelling. We know customs is going to flag it and hold it up. And it seems very maybe trivial, but it's important enough to them to delay the shipment, and we want to make sure that people don't hit that kind of a speed bump or an issue. Um, and I always like to highlight that, again, we do a lot. We're actually probably going to do around 60,000 certificates of origin this year, so not an insignificant number. And within that system, again, we're going to know what countries' rules are, and we have the ability to tweak our system as well to make sure it's going to be compliant with any country that people are potentially shipping into. And that's why I have future proof right there at the bottom as well. This is always something pretty important to highlight because I'll give some interesting stories around this one. There are companies that obviously need a certificate of origin. If there's a local manufacturer and they're making a product, they have widgets coming out of a factory that they're putting in boxes and selling around the world, very obviously they might need a certificate of origin. I think that's what really comes to people's mind in the first place when we're thinking about certificates of origin. But in actuality, the biggest verticals for us, a lot of agribusiness, as well as a lot of refined food products as well. That could be things like spice blends, are really kind of big cases for us, as well as a lot of material producers, so lumber and paper and things like that. We see a lot in that space. We also see, unsurprisingly, a lot of logistics providers, so your UPS, FedEx. We get a bunch of different branches that have registered with us to kind of get documentation done. Pharma is also one of our biggest sectors, and I don't know that people really realize that right away. That could be really obvious medical producers like AstraZeneca, Merck, those sorts of categories. But it also means we're looking at things like hospitals or universities that have, research labs in them because they're oftentimes shipping and moving product as well. There might be hospitals with a small amount of refined manufacturing and products are moving out of the hospital overseas. It could be as simple as you have a hospital upgrading some of their equipment, right? If they're getting a new CAT scan, that old one might end up going to another country and they're going to need documentation to actually get it into that location. So that's always interesting. We've had universities. I think we've had one that was like a community college that was donating their old computers. That's a really nice act of charity. They were shipping them to another country. They still had to have documentation to clear customs, so they still need to get a stamped certificate of origin by the chamber. We have a lot of like small scale jewelry shops as well, including some people that don't even have their own website. They're just on Etsy. where they might have a buyer overseas. They're really excited. They're selling somewhere overseas for the first time, and they get detained by customs because they need a stamp certificate of origin as part of their documentation. Um, and we even had one that I always like to highlight was a dentist shop. They had a giant painting in their main lobby that I don't know what the story is, but somehow they ended up selling it to someone in Turkey. This was before the name change, so this isn't related, it just happens to be. But they didn't have a certificate of origin. They were looking at, thousands of dollars in penalties to get the products into the country without a stamp certificate saying that the painting was of US origin. At some point, one of their local chambers had run a campaign on certificates of origin, and maybe at the time it wasn't relevant to them, but on that day, it was pretty important that they'd seen it at some point in the past and could dig into it. Um, and I've highlighted here as well that certificates of origin can be a really positive lead source. So sometimes there may be non-members in your community that maybe aren't familiar with the chamber, but again, they're in that unique situation where maybe they run an Etsy shop out of their home office, and they're being told they need to get a certificate of origin for a shipment that they sent overseas because it's being detained. That's now your really good way to get connected with them and maybe get them plugged into the rest of the business community that they're a part of, right? So I think there is a lot of value there as well in terms of the actual lead generation from certificates of origin. So always something to kind of highlight. Um, I've mentioned a little bit about this, and this slide I may need to even update myself because it's a constant change, right? Where we all seeing different trends, different changes around digitization. Um, I like to always highlight though that digitization for the certificate of origin is not new. In fact, the United States is actually pretty far behind other countries. Most of Europe is almost entirely digital. China, it's maybe a little bit easier for them to organize and standardize. You wouldn't be surprised, but they've been all electronic for maybe close to a decade at this point around their trade documents. So it's not going to be uncommon for customs to see an electronically stamped document. In fact, it's going to be kind of the opposite. It's going to be uncommon for them to see something physically stamped these days. But we are seeing different pushes and pulls for different countries, and these are some of the ones we've highlighted more recently. Um, I'll say one of the trends we're seeing is, and this is not to sound scary, but um, chambers being contacted by fraudulent organizations more directly. We still do, probably get maybe 2 or 3 fake companies a week that register with us. We do allow direct registrations ourselves, and we actually run ads specifically outside the US to try and capture those people ahead of time. So very rarely for a long time did we see fake registrations come to our chamber partners. But I would say in the past 3 months, that actually has started to change. And so even last week we had like a fake oil and gas company that even managed to pay chamber dues and then register for the program that we had to say, no, this is not genuine. We're not going to be issuing them documents. Um, so something to be aware of, right? That liability gets passed over to us to issue any kind of like formal documents when we're going through that process. And we do a pretty strict vetting on anyone that's registering for us. Um, I do have a little bit for documents covered. I've mostly talked about the certificate of origin. That's probably about 90% of what we do, but there are some other spaces as well. So we do get a lot of certificate of free sale registrations. That's a document that can go by different names as well. If you're ever here, member or even just someone in your community asking for a stamped document, we're a really great resource on that. And we're a great resource because we can also say no for you. So we've had people ask for stamps on things like patents or federally issued documents. That is a no-no, but so it's something that we can kind of help clear up and potentially say no. And I do want to highlight that we also are capable of doing a legalization flow for the documents. I'm not going to get into too much detail, but oftentimes if someone actually brings you a piece of paper to stamp as the chamber, that might be the first step in like a 5-step program to get the document legalized by the embassy is the naming convention they use. We actually can carry the document through its full process, and because we've tried to work directly with some of the embassies, and because of the quantity we do, and because we're a chamber, we have gotten certain special permissions to kind of either skip the line or cut steps and get that done a lot faster and probably a lot cheaper than they could get it done if they were doing it themselves. So there was a space there to highlight. Again, one of the things you'll get by opting into the program is going to be a um, suggested wording page for what to kind of put on your website to highlight the program. And it's going to have language that you can really just copy and paste to get onto that page. So you don't have to know about all of these specific things. Instead, just know we've got a team here. We've got myself as well as other people that are going to be able to answer questions when they come up. To get started, I believe there's just a simple opt-in form that I put together. Basically, that's just the core information we need to set up a profile on Airaside that can hold registrations. Ideally, we do just a quick kickoff call after you get that registration completed. So that's probably like 30 minutes where I can kind of detail a few little pieces that we'll pass over. So we normally will put together some marketing materials that you can use. And it's good just to kind of cover off on the registration flow, just so you have some basic information in case people ask questions, you know where to put them. Again, we don't expect you to know the answers, but you can kind of know who it is that can kind of tackle that on their side as well. I think that's actually it. So that's pretty good. So I'm happy to jump into questions. I wanted to make sure we have plenty of time because I'm sure you all might have a lot.
I might have missed this, but is
Mhm.
there a charge for the chambers to be a part of this program?
Oh yeah, let me actually get into the specifics on financials. So there's no cost to opt in. There's no cost for initial setup either, and we don't have any kind of monthly minimums or expected volume that we're going to have from you, right? So we do have quite a few chambers that maybe they've got one member that signed up and they do just a handful a year, right? We're really happy with those sorts of arrangements as well. Instead, the way that we have it structured is that there is a cost that the exporter is going to pay when they're getting a document done. That cost is set at $25 for members and $50 for non-members. Um, you would get whatever is above $17 on each side, meaning you'll get $8 every time a member does a transaction, and you'll get $33 each time a non-member does a transaction. So it's actually potentially revenue net generating. Um, you're not paying that 25 or 50. Again, that's what they're going to be presented and charged when they go and get a certificate of origin completed.
Is that on par with what they're normally paying wherever they're getting them now?
Yeah, I would say that's generally pretty typical. I've seen kind of two categories, right? There are some chambers that don't charge for members, but then they also really don't want members to know that they do it, right? It's not highlighted on their website. It's just they have one high tier member that has been doing it since before anyone that's working at the chamber right now was involved with the chamber, and everyone's too afraid to kind of approach them on it. So I do see that situation, but I would say 25 and 50 is actually pretty standard today. Um, even especially with inflation, right? We haven't seen like that go up any time recently. So I think we're probably pretty comfortable with 25 and 50.
Nice.
And Alex, if you could clarify that, so it's 25 and 50 per unique document, not per,
Mhm.
correct?
Yeah, so we don't build the exporters to register, so I'll mention that off the bat that is a free to register program for them. If they have a unique document, so they have a certificate of origin that they want to have stamped, that's a $25 fee. If the certificate of origin is 5 pages, we don't bill extra for each individual page. But let's say they have 3 unique certificates of origin for maybe the same country, right? They're sending a package every month to someone. They would, in that case, need 3 distinct certificates of origin and would have 3 price points for that. I'll mention as well, we do upcharge for the certificate of free sale. It's unlikely you'll hear that one too often, but it does come up. That one we charge, it'll be at 75 and 100, and the amount we pay back to the chamber is going to be the same. So it'll be $8 versus 33. that one's just a little bit more labor intensive for us. I should say a lot more labor intensive for us. So that's why there's that upcharge there. But just so you know, in case that potentially comes up. But again, while we're seeing more of them, it may not be something that you're going to get caught. But just in case.
Hi, Alex, it's Marilyn with Solon. How are you?
Great. Howdy. Yeah, thanks for joining today.
Sure, sure. So for those of you, I think Cindy mentioned it, Solon's been a part of this program for a while. So I guess just the one question that I had is, I mean, you know, we do, from what I'm understanding, our program is not going to change any because it's the same program that is being offered through NOAC. Okay. So secondly, we do get our payments, you know, ACH or electronically deposited, but sometimes it's a couple of months before we get our statements as far as what matches up with those payments. So how is that system going to work through NOAC?
So statements should be on a monthly basis, and I think you have had some correspondence with Kelly around kind of cleaning that up. I'm not sure if we had like the wrong contact point or something like that on our side. But I believe you're up to date on that, and going forward, it should be the case that you'll get them on a monthly basis, generally just after the payment actually gets issued back to you. In terms of the organizations, there is going to be a spot for when they register what the contact email will be, and that's where these statements will effectively go. If there's a change, right, so if someone leaves the chamber and that email isn't being monitored anymore, that is going to be the case that we'll have to know who it is that should be getting those statements. We do have an account on our side for each of the chambers that are registered, and so maybe that will be a positive space for you and for the other chambers as well, is that you do have the ability to just log in and kind of see the activity yourself at any point that you want to. But again, that's going to be potentially set up under a user account that might not be active with the chamber anymore, right? And so that's something we do see happen often. We're trying to figure out what the best way to kind of go about that is, but it may be honestly that there's not like this one size fits all solution to make sure that we have the valid, accurate contact point. We've tried going forward to always use info ad addresses. And we are working on some system adjustments as well, where right now that is a manual process. I know going into next year, that is going to be an automated process. So there's not going to be a task of someone here to kind of compile them for each of the chambers that we work with and send them out. So
okay, so I'm sorry, Alex, you just said something a few sentences ago. So
great.
Each chamber is going to have a login where they go to see the activity of their members and non-members.
So we're always going to send out the statements, and I know that's what most chambers just have preferred, right? Because it's a easy to read kind of like PDF for them.
Right.
But even right now, you do have a login where you'd be able to kind of go in, see who's active, who's maybe hasn't submitted in a while, and get a sense of whoever's registered for the program as well. So
how do we know what that is? We don't.
I'll
have
pass that back over. Yeah. So at some point, when the chamber was first set up, it would have been shared. I'll make sure that you do have that.
Okay, yeah, because I know Libby and myself, we do not have a login. That's why we are always just kind of looking to Kelly to say,
Gotcha.
Here's your statement that matches, you know, that deposit. So we, you know, we just recently got May, June, July, and August.
Yeah, and again, I'll look back into that to where the delay was. It might just be as simple as we had the wrong contact on record in terms of where it was being sent, and that has unfortunately come up a few times. Just again, staff changes and people rotate, so sometimes those things need to be updated.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Any other questions?
So what is the next step? Will somebody be sending out forms to sign up, or?
Yeah, so I will work on the replay for this, which wouldn't take me very long since it's only half hours, which is great. I will get that done. I already have the form. Alex would have to send that already. So if you can send me the slide deck, Alex, right after this, that would be this, and I'll get all that put together and I can send that out this afternoon to everyone. So the form, all we have to do is actually, Alex, are you opposed to having them copy me on that form?
Oh yeah, that would be good. I think, yeah, you should know once they've actually kind of jumped in and opted into the program.
Okay, perfect. So, oh, it looks like we do have a question in the chat here, so let's put that in.
That's always great.
How was a non-member determined a business in the chamber service industry?
So one thing, yeah, whenever a chamber opts in, we will do like some kind of a kickoff call, and that normally goes through the registration process. The process there is not especially complicated. There will be some kind of a registration on your website. Normally that's just a PDF that we prepare for you where they'll put the information in, and then we would prefer that to always go back to the affiliate chamber. So it would go back to your side and then get forwarded over to a general email on our side. We use register@awtcc.org. And there is a box on that form to check for member, non-member, but we oftentimes have a more low-tech solution, which is when you forward that over to us to get the company set up. You can just say, this is a member, this is not a member, right? It can be as simple as that. The reason why we like to have that step in the middle is because it makes it very clear to the registering exporter this is a program that you're providing. So it makes it clear that they're connected to your organization. And it's also the case that we don't want to hear from them whether or not they are a member of the chamber. So we have had many years back cases where people would send it over to us directly. And maybe they took membership to mean, oh yeah, we're interested in membership. You can send us more information. That would be the more generous way to kind of read that. But we did have some cases where members were not members and they kind of needed to opt into that program. The other thing that's, I think, important is if they're not a member, even before that form gets forwarded over to us, there could be value in a conversation. So again, I mentioned during the slideshow that this is a good lead source potentially for the chamber. So effectively, it's up to you how you want to kind of handle that situation. I'll mention as well, if membership status changes, you technically will have a login where you can get that adjusted yourself. But I think in principle, most of the chambers just email to that same register@awtcc.org and ask us to get it updated. So if that does happen, then we can pretty easily make that adjustment. Registration for exporters, we always say will be done we will respond within 1 business day. Certificates of origin, we do guaranteed same-day processing. So once you're actually in the system, we're very quick to get those documents issued out to you. But prior to getting registered, we do a good bit of screening, and we've actually been increasing some of the due diligence we do on that recently. So we'd like to say 1 business day. Most of the companies don't have any red flags come up and they get set up within an hour. But if something does come up, we'll do a little bit more digging. Even then, most of the time they're okay. But I would say, yeah, we get maybe 3 a week that are all not. So just know we're really happy with that process for vetting, and so far things have been going very well for us. And yeah, and you'll have the slides and the recording, so that's perfectly fine if you did miss some. But as well, I'm happy to have like spoke conversations, right? So as questions might come up afterwards, know that I'm here as a resource. Cindy will be able to help kind of facilitate those conversations if anything does come up.
Awesome. So as a follow-up, I think, to Val's question then, so they submit the form, that form then is going to go to you, and you will set up a call just to, and then, follow back up with the chamber, with all the next steps for them.
Yeah. So once we actually get the account set up, 2 things are going to happen. There's going to be 2 emails that go out. One is just a general welcome email that'll kind of answer questions they might have or help ease them into the system. The chamber is going to be copied on that email. So you'll see the moment that they get registered and once their account's actually live. The second message they'll get will be their login credentials. You won't be copied on that one. We don't actually know what the login credentials are either. The system generates that in a way that we can't see. But they'll get their welcome email, and then they'll get the login email, and they'll be able to pretty easily jump in and get going in the system. Once they're registered, again, that's the initial hurdle for the company. After that, it's a really easy process to just come in and get a document sent out as they need to.
Okay, and then for the chamber itself.
For the chamber itself, yeah, there's an initial form that you'll need to fill out that'll have the chamber information that we'll use to set up your account, as well as things like the chamber name that you want us to list with, so that when they log in, they'll know they'll log into an account affiliated with a particular chamber, essentially. So I've got all that information, as well as who the primary contact would be in terms of who's going to get copied on that welcome email, who's going to get statements, as well as the information on where we need to send the money to as well. So at the end of the month where that needs to get sent.
Gotcha, okay. Perfect, that was the question. Okay. Wonderful, all right, well, I will, we will get all of this put together and get this out to everyone this afternoon. And that way you can send in your forms and we'll get everybody rolling.
Great.
I think that's great. So if you have any questions after this, we'll send out the information and you can certainly, forward in any questions that you might have. If you get any random questions about certificates, like we got one last week, is a random question that I couldn't answer either. And I've been in the industry 10 years and it was a question I had never heard. So, Alex is a really great resource to just reach out to, if you do get those strange random certificate questions. And he was able to, so. Yep, absolutely. We'll make sure to get the information out for Alex himself.